Welcome, everybody. We're
Welcome, welcome,
expecting a
welcome.
big crew today, so we'll give you a few seconds to roll in here.
Yeah, and first of all, congratulations, because I think and tell us, I guess maybe tell us if you're not class 2025, because I think by and large we're talking to 2025 folks, maybe even some in college folks. Uh, but your kids are going to college, so you're going somewhere. That's why
Woo!
you're
You
here.
did
You
it!
did it. So it's
Or
a
maybe your kids are choosing a gap year, which is the
right.
same thing. You got through it. You found a good fit school. You're just gonna wait. They're just gonna wait a year, so that's all good too.
We do our best to try to remind you all how big of accomplishment it is. 18-year body of work collectively, and it's a big deal, right? And so before you freak out too much about how the hell we're going to pay for this thing now, and by the way, we're going to help you there. And how much, what are these loan rates going to be? Sink it in, man. It's a huge accomplishment, and again, we're going to help you with this last, arguably most painful part of the process of like, ooh, okay, now we got to pay this pesky bill. But it's a big deal. And if you want, we'd love to see it. Just throw in the chat where you guys going, where your kids going to college, or maybe a couple of you still got more than one deposit in. I just spoke with somebody last night that made a decision, just at the wire, last night had put more than one deposit in, but where are we going? Loyola, Chicago, Rutgers, Penn State. We are, baby. Williamette, ASU, WBI, Fairfield. We're all over, Peggy. We all over. Amazing
Ah,
school.
nice.
Amazing. Look at this. Murderers Row here. Yeah, it's awesome, guys. Hey, I just saw the Hokies, VT Honors College. Go Hokies. Certainly. Um, Okay, Peggy. Let's do some brief introductions for those of you that are new. Welcome for our OGs, our groupies, as you've nicknamed yourselves. Welcome back here. But my name is Matt Carpenter. I'm a founder at College Aid Pro. This is class 2025 is a special one for me because the class 2005 was the first group that I kind of led, helped navigate through this process. So pretty amazing to say that we're 20 years past now. So you guys will always kind of have a special place for me. And our job is to try to educate you along every kind of major stage, and we're always focused on the affordability piece and how do we maximize financial aid, how do we maximize scholarships, how do we find great schools within our budget. At this stage, whether again you've been with us or just joined us, we are where we are, right? We just got to kind of, we've made our decision. We got to make it happen. So we're going to talk about, if we have some resources, when do we use what? How do we leverage cash flow? That's a strategy that often gets kind of overlooked and dismissed. And most people say there's no cash flow to leverage, right? We're going to talk about that point specifically. And then when we have to borrow, it's a really, really important decision that in my mind doesn't get enough, I don't know, airtime, because it can be a huge swing. We're going to show you an actual statistic at the end, just a huge swing in how much you ultimately end up paying for college, right? Because when we're borrowing, we got to add that onto the cost here. So that's our goal today, to make sure you get kind of all these major decisions right. And by the way, I'm at our office in Salem, Mass, just north of Boston here. My brother used to coach for the Hokies, so we still got a lot of love for those guys down there. Amazing school, amazing campus. The fairy godmother, financial aid, the budget queen herself, Peggy Keough, joining me from today. Originally another East Coast, specifically Jersey gal, now living in Seattle, but she's bringing her talents to Tucson, Arizona. So Tucson's in for a party. But Peggy, why don't you say hi, and we'll get started here.
So happy to be here. Kudos again. Congrats. I have twins and remember writing my last check when they were done, and also remember like making these decisions and getting them, this is the summer, you're getting them all ready for this new chapter. So it's an exciting time, a little sad, but also super, super exciting. So congrats for getting through it, and people are still putting in schools. Like it's awesome. This is going to be their next chapter. They figure out how they're going to impact the world. So we love it. Um, Yeah, so today, a few housekeeping items. If you are new to us, we love questions, so keep them coming, and we're going to talk about at the end too how we can help you further. We always give really nice. We always have a treat for our live people, so hang on till the end. Put your questions in the Q&A. We'll remind you. You can be anonymous, and that's where Matt and I are going to be watching for all the questions. And yes, this is being recorded. I will give you a little heads up. This is jam packed. We are going to share a lot really quickly, so you will get the recording if you want to re-listen to anything, because we're going to cover a lot of information today. So don't, yeah. And we love emojis too, so go ahead and let them fly. And we know there's people out there actually listening. Okay, so why don't I share my screen and let's get going here. Okay, so Matt didn't mention, but he is one of the co-founders of College A Pro. So if you're brand new to us, this truly is our mission. We are a very mission-minded company, and this is what gets us out of bed. And this empowering families to shop smarter for college. That's what we're doing today. And this you are right at the end of the journey for this child, right? So it's a super important step. And it's a strategy, right? Not every family is going to do the same thing around loans by any means. And then there's just a lot of stuff going on that we'll talk about around that too. So it's a big piece of the puzzle. So definitely great that you're here today. Um, and there's the happy couple. Um, so I'm going to turn it over to Matt. We're going to talk about appeals for a minute, and he's going to do a mini dive into why we're talking about that. That was the step before, but this year's kind of an interesting year around appeals. So I will turn it over to you, Matt.
Yeah, and you can just put them all on there, Peggy, because I'm gonna spend just 2 minutes here and not talk through each one. Here's the takeaway, guys. Traditionally, after May 1st, after you put in your deposits at colleges, we would say, and traditionally, historically, whatever money you got from your college, it's signed, sealed, delivered. You're locked in. With everything that's going on with the Department of Education and this new administration, among other variables, and just kind of higher ed at large, more than we ever have. We saw more last year, a little bit more the year before. So this is kind of a 3-year trend, but this year is unique in terms of colleges are giving more money than we have ever seen after May 1st. So the takeaway is don't be afraid to go back to your college and ask for more money still. Now, there's a method to the madness. You can't just write an email and say, hey, give me more money. You have to be sophisticated and exactly how you go back and who do you go back to? Do you go back to the admissions office? Do you go back to the financial aid office? Is it both? Should the parent lead that conversation? Should the student lead that conversation? Is it both? It all depends on the school, on the situation, etc. But the takeaway is we have seen more schools than we ever have give better deals after May 1st. And so again, I have more than one example that I can think of right now where the dream school that a family got into but couldn't afford, so they put down a deposit and basically committed somewhere else. They've since May 1st, we've been able to get a better deal from that initial dream school, and now we're kind of changing our hats and going to that dream because they've come up with enough money to make it happen. So you guys can see the screen here. I'm not going to hit on each one, but the takeaway is, don't be afraid. And I'll tell you, I'll add to that. There was a lot of cases where we already appealed before May 1st and were denied. Okay, doubled back after May 1st and got more money, or we had a successful appeal. By successful, we at least got some more money, but we doubled back after May 1st, got a better deal. And Peg, you can go to the next slide here. And I know you guys can't really see this, but this is just a sample size of some of the successful appeals we've had just with this class and just recently over the last couple of weeks. It's a complete smattering of public schools, private schools, big schools, small schools, and everything in between, and successful appeals, all the way up to beyond $50,000 a year to the smaller ones that, where they're coming up with another, two, three, four, $5,000 more a year. But remember, that's tax free, guys, and that's over 4 years. So even if a school comes back and says, all right, here's $5,000 more, you just made yourself 20 grand, right? Essentially tax free. So that's the big takeaway. I mean, Peggy talked about it. We're going to talk at the at the end, and we're going to have kind of a promotion just for folks that show up live today. But I would argue when you look at us as a company and our team of experts, when it maybe the biggest kind of skill set we have is going back to colleges and getting better deals. So I'm going to recommend you book an hour with one of our experts. You can meet with a director of financial aid at Harvard, at MIT, the former director at USC, or anybody you meet with. Again, this is kind of the sweet spot. And we also get to leverage, our team and just kind of have that hive mentality and also leverage our network that we have, at these colleges. So again, the takeaway is don't be afraid to go back and ask for more money if you want to maximize your odds of having that become successful. Think about bringing us in to help with that. And again, I'll share details at the end. Oh, Peggy, you know what? Let me share my screen real quick because I just want to make sure for those that haven't already, and maybe you can put a link in the chat. For most of you guys have already set up your free accounts with us, right? But here's just so you know where to kind of leverage our expertise for this part of the process. Obviously, we kind of have this instant net price calculator for every college in the country. We're much more accurate than the college's own net price calculators, right? Again, for those of you that have been following along, you've seen that evidence. But once you're accepted at a college, you can upload your financial aid offer here. Okay, we'll translate it. You guys know those are a little bit confusing to read, but again, you've already committed here. But we'll tell you, did you get a good deal? Are you like a Boston college that typically under awards families on average $10,000? But we're going to tell you if you should get more money, how much more should you get? In other words, and this is going to be an important part of your appeal, arguably one of the most important data points, how much more specifically should you be asking for? And again, this is going to vary based on the school, based on the situation, based on if we're doing merit with admissions or need with financial aid or both. But we will give you a great kind of framework to say, hey, don't just randomly ask, can I have some more money? But how much more should you be asking at this particular college? Because again, that's going to have a huge, that's going to matter when it comes to whether or not it's a successful appeal. And guys, just a reminder, and I'm sure a bunch of people jumped on late, put all your questions in the Q&A. That's where we're going to monitor as opposed to the chat. So if you already have questions in the chat, just copy and paste them.
Just paste them. I answered a couple, which I shouldn't have, but then I said, hey, put them in the Q&A. So, and there are a few in there that are ready for you there, Matt. All right, let me share my screen. And so that's appeal. So now let's get into the second piece of this, okay? But we felt it was important to mention that because yeah, we are seeing some kind of cool stuff this year that we usually don't see. So let's talk through the timeline of this last step, if you will, in your journey with this child. So as far as the timeline and bills and everything, depending on the college, if the college, like I'm out in Washington, like Matt said, all the schools are quarters except for Wazoo out in Eastern Washington. So it depends. A semester school, bills could be coming sooner. So we're halfway through May, right? So you want to get your head around this. I'm going to talk about payment plans in a few minutes. If you start a payment plan, that could potentially be starting sooner. So depending on the college, you could have due dates starting July, August. Like with my son's school, they were both semesters. I was paying in August for him. Wasn't paying for my daughter until the Friday of the first week of classes, which ended up being early September. So it really depends on the school. You'll get to know it once you're, in it for a couple semesters or quarters. But the takeaway is it's coming. It's almost here for second semester, the next quarter. Obviously, that'll be the November, December time frame, or maybe even January, like my daughter's school, if it's semesters. Loan applications can usually be completed and issued quickly, depending on the type of loan. You could have almost instantaneous. Yes, you were approved. No, you were not. It just depends on the loan. So we advise to have this kind of have your plan set up by mid-July, right? Because you want to know if you're doing some through cash flow, if you've got a payment plan, you don't want to obviously take more loans than you need to. So you want to kind of bring this all together, know what you're bringing to the table, and know what your different loan options are. So Matt mentioned cash flow when he was introing today. This is huge. Like a lot of times, you really want to sit back and think about there's your overall cash flow. If you have a budget and you're not cringing when I say that word, there might be places where you can tweak and even like the slide says, even come up with $100 a month. That could potentially save you $5,000 of what you need to borrow. It seems like a relatively small amount of money, but as you multiply it by all the months and years, it can become a big deal. Also, there could be money that you're used to spending on your child who's going off to college, obviously, and that's like a high school or expense, like a sport or lessons or something, and all of that could contribute to, oh, well, I don't have that expense anymore. So that can go toward college and it seems logical, but a lot of times people don't you don't think of that. You're used to spending it. It's just part of your budget. So we talk about hitting the reset button, right? It's probably a good idea, my household because of the way I am. We kind of do this every year naturally, even though my kids aren't around. Like, how much do we spend on this or that? Was that too much? How can we kind of tweak things? Do we want to spend more on this for XYZ reasons? And, like it says on the slide here, also like cleaning out your junk drawer. Is there stuff you're spending money on that it's like, why do we have Hulu and Apple and this and this and this, and we're not even watching most of them? That's a perfect example with all the streaming services out here now. Um, but also like gym memberships, and again, money that you might be spending on your child that's going to college that's going to go away. But just this is, I, as a financial planner by background, I find this helpful for everybody, regardless of college, but it's super helpful when you're in this college mode. And you're trying to find pennies and dollars anywhere that can help to pay for college and minimize what you might wanna or have to borrow. So I mentioned this before, payment plans. Every college, and a lot of times it'll say it on the last page of the financial aid award letter. It'll spell out their payment plans. They're not all the same, just like everything in this process. But typically, if it's semesters, they might say you're making 3 payments a semester or 4, and quarters, the same thing. There's almost always an enrollment fee. And sometimes you can ask, I would ask, can you waive that fee? But then what they're usually doing is they're taking the costs and they're dividing it by the number of payments. It's not like when you pay your car insurance where they're jacking up the price 10% to give you the convenience to pay monthly or something. They want to help families pay the bill. They want your money, basically. So look into that, because for a lot of people, it's way easier to make those 4 payments over a semester than to come up with the chunk after the money that the college is giving and any, loans you take directly from the federal government. So keep that in mind. Also, whatever that delta is, it's not that you have to take that full amount into the payment plan. It's your payment plan. So you decide and work through that and just get familiar with what the college offers that your child chose so that you can leverage that to the max. Okay, so now let's talk about resources. So you might have several different buckets. I talked about cash flow. So if you've got a cash flow certain amount you can cover a month and you've got a payment plan, that's perfect. That will fit really nicely in there. If you have a custodial account, that's this first bullet here. UGMA, UTMA. If that doesn't mean anything to you, that probably means it's not in your world, so don't worry about it. But if you're kind of shaking your head on the other side here, yes, we have one of those. That is an asset of your child's, but can be used for the benefit of anything for your child. So obviously college, it can be used for. That's a potential asset to use. Realize there are tax ramifications when you use this. This already affected your financial aid because it should have been put on there as an asset of your child's, which stings a lot more than a parental asset. So that's a question that you can talk to us about moving that into a parental asset. There's tax ramifications for liquidating this account. So this can be part of the mix, but if you, my main talk track here, if you're getting need-based aid, you want to talk to somebody to make sure you understand when you start liquidating that account, what it could mean for your child's tax return in this year when you're liquidating it, which will end up being in the mix a year plus down for financial aid. The second bullet, much more common, 529s, Coverdale's, prepaid tuition plans. If you have a 529 or one of those accounts and you're the owner as the parent, yeah, that is a very common, that's what you saved it for, right? You're going to use it for college. You want to make sure that you lay this out over 4 years and how you're going to cover this cost. And we can absolutely help you with that. Because if you don't have a 529 that covers all 4 years, which I've seen people that do, but it's not the norm. It's a lot of money. And people, if you were fortunate enough to save that much, that's awesome. But if you don't have enough to cover all 4 years, your share as a family, you want to strategize around this. And we'll talk about it in a bit when we're getting into the loans, because certain loans are use it or lose it. So you don't want to use up all your 529 and then say, oh, I want to go back and get that loan that my child can get. It's gone from freshman year. You can't go back and get it. Okay. And it could be a really good subsidized loan potentially. And Matt's going to touch on that in a few minutes. The other bucket, if you're fortunate enough to have this, it's amazing. If you have gifts from grandparents, or a grandparent, or your buddy from college, you never had kids, has a 529 for your child, that's awesome. Most schools, you don't even have to strategize on the timing of using that because it doesn't affect financial aid negatively like it used to at FAFSA only schools. CSS profile schools, they're going to ask about it. And so you should talk to us about that. There's strategies around that. If you're getting need-based aid, that you don't end up losing need-based aid because you have what they call this outside resource. So there's some strategies there, but that's another bucket. So the takeaway here is I can't just put up this slide and say every family should do this with their UTMA, this with their 529s. It's very specific to your situation and how much money you need every year and what the package is that your child got. Is it merit? Is it need? Is it a combination? So, but hopefully that helps kind of lay out the pieces that are there and how it could all come together over that 4 year plan. And 4 years might kind of blow your mind. Let us help you because we can lay it out. You can see every year. We can inflate it. I mean, it will bring you a lot of peace of mind. All right, let's get a little bit. I'm not going to go too far in the weeds on 529s, but just let you know so you don't make any mistakes. 529s need to be used for what the IRS calls qualified higher education expenses. So that's tuition and fees, room and board, books, not travel. That's part of the cost of attendance for the colleges, but it's not part of the IRS. Doesn't really make a lot of sense because it's part of your expense to get your child to school potentially, but not travel. So it's basically tuition and fees, room and board, books, and then anything the college requires. If they say you have to buy this computer, we have a bunch of stuff loaded on it, virus protection, other stuff that all the students on our campus are going to use, then that's a qualified education expense if they're requiring it. As far as how to get the money, you basically reach out to the five, if it's Vanguard, T. Rowe Price, who's ever administering that 529, and you ask for the money. It's on you to make sure that you are using it for qualified higher education expenses. It's not, they will give you the whole account at once. The IRS is they're gonna get back to you and say, really? Did you have enough expenses? Because if you didn't, then you're going to pay a penalty and tax on the earnings. So you want to have a really good paper trail while your kids are in college. And it's tax year for the IRS. It's not school year. So last bullet here, timing of distributions. If you're going to take money out of the 529, say for second semester of your child, like when they start in January, if you need to take the money out of the 529 when you are paying the university in the same tax year. So don't take money out in December to pay a bill in January. The IRS doesn't like that and there's going to be issues. Take it out in December, pay it in December, take it out in January, pay it in January. So that's something that people get caught up the first time, and you just don't want to get any letters, any correspondence from the IRS, right? So that's high level. I know I went through it super quickly, but kind of best practices with 529s. And then lastly, just touch on this. I'm just going to plant the seed. There is a great education tax credit. And when I say tax credit, what I mean is you do your taxes, you owe 20,000 in taxes. If you take this tax credit, you now owe 17.5 to the government. So it comes right off of your tax liability, and it's per child. If I was eligible for it back in the day, I could have taken a $5,000 credit. You see on here the phase out, typical IRS, the way they do things. If your adjusted gross income is below 160, you get the full. Over 180, you don't get it at all. And in between, you're going to get a prorated amount. Main thing to realize, and people sometimes get stung the first year with this, your CPA will know, but they might not tell you until after the fact. You need to have $4,000 of tuition and fees and book expenses that you pay for out of cash flow, out of some account that doesn't have a tax advantage. 529s grow tax free, and you don't pay tax when you pull it out. That has a tax advantage. You can't pull all the money out of a 529 and then say, hey, I want the tax credit. That's double dipping. That's what the IRS calls it. And you will be disqualified for that tax year. So make sure you've got those $4,000 coming out of a bucket where you're not getting any tax savings on that $4,000. And remember, 4,000 in each tax year per student, and you need to be claiming the student on your tax return. So if you're divorced, you got to time that. If you flip flop on claiming the student, your child as a dependent, you want to make sure that you coordinate that with your ex so that you can maximize getting a tax credit if it's applicable. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Matt, to get into the down and dirty on the borrowing stuff here.
Peggy, we got a Division 1 crowd here today. I'm getting great questions. I'm getting peppered in there. Ooh,
All right, I'm gonna hop in.
yeah,
Remember, guys, I see a bunch in the chat. So
yeah, guys. Yeah, again, we can't answer any questions in the chat. So if you're asking them in there, you got to copy and paste them over if you want us to have a chance to answer. We won't get to all of them today. We're just kind of outgunned here, but please fire at will because we're getting a lot of great questions. I also just want to caveat some of the questions are, again, really good questions. Should I use my 529 all up front? Does it make sense to borrow and see if, my investments elsewhere, 529s and otherwise can, outpace, the rate that I'm paying to borrow? What should I do about my any questions like this? It would be reckless for us to give a firm recommendation. The ones that we know the answers to, we'll answer them, but there's just too many variables, right? We'd have to dig in, look at your whole situation and say, okay, here's the tax ramifications. Okay, here's what about the rate we can expect to borrow at versus a reasonable, let's get out our crystal ball and look at, worst case, best case in terms of what our investments might do, which good luck with that crystal ball. But we're not being dismissive if we don't give firm recommendations. Please take me at face value there. And I've told a number of you, look, this is an awesome question and it's important what you decide to do with it. You got to book an hour with, Peg and myself or any of the experts on our team for us to be able to, again, kind of do a deep dive in your situation. And we'll definitely be able to give you a firm recommendation. So again, I'm not being dismissive, but you're going to hear us say that more than once because for us to, give uh, firm recommendations or guidance advice around a lot of those questions, it would be reckless, right? And we'd be kind of flying blind. Okay, general borrowing rules, guys. If I meet with 10 different families, later today and they each say, okay, what loan should I take? I need to borrow. Very likely I'm giving 10 different answers based on their situation, based on the school, based on, the strengths of their application, based on kind of less tangible variables that we'll talk about of like, okay, how much, does it matter to you in terms of like consumer protection or flexibility with the repayment options, or are we just trying to get the lowest rate, right? And that's very much tied to the second point here is we're going to help you determine, we're going to do that in the next 30 minutes here. What's your family's borrowing criteria? I can all but get guess all of you are right now, like, I have no idea what the hell borrowing criteria is, much less what our families is. We're going to get there because that's going to help us point you towards what loan is going to make the most sense for your family, which again is kind of what I just said there for point number three. And then we'll give you some guidelines. How much is too much to borrow? And again, for those of you that have been using your accounts, your software with us, you already know what that looks like at the school based on the major, etc. Okay, Peggy, we can keep it going here. Okay, so again, this is all on the platform. This is a software. I actually should have Peggy, moving forward, we'll just show it in there. It's a smarter way to do it. But how much is too much to borrow? This is I think a great question to ask, and it's specifically tied to the student, right? We're answering this question for the student because there's more complexities involved when we talk about how much is too much for a parent to borrow, and more, things we would need to know in terms of what do you have saved in retirement, how much longer do we want to work, what's our retirement goals, et cetera, et cetera. But to give you a metric for the students, and again, you guys have this in your platform. For those of you that have the accounts, we kind of have four thresholds. Number one, the ideal scenario, which very few people get to realize, is that the student borrows nothing. That's not realistic for most students. And we even see some disadvantages of that, data-driven and anecdotal. It's not bad for the students to have some actual investment in their education here, right? We just don't have too much. So what does that mean? The second threshold, we don't want to borrow, or sorry, the second next, like, very successful outcome is the student only borrows up to $27,000 via the federal direct student loan. I'm going to unpack that loan in detail in a few minutes here. The next threshold here, and kind of the next good place to land, is over the course of 4 years, the student doesn't borrow more than we expect them to make their first year after graduation. Now, again, in our software, we have this broken down by college and by major at that particular college. But here's some more general guidelines, right? If your student wants to go become a teacher, that's amazing. But we don't want them to borrow more than $50,000 total over the course of 4 years, because after that, the math doesn't make sense. Whereas if they're going to major in computer science, we're comfortable with them borrowing a lot more, again, because the math kind of supports that. Once we get above borrowing, what we expect to make the first year after graduation, that's when the math just doesn't work on our favor. And again, in our software, we're going to be like, guys, we want you to be cautious here. Take an extra good look. But that's kind of the answer to that question. You can go ahead, Peggy. Okay, so this is just kind of an overview, all the different types of loans. We're going to spend some time on the direct federal student loan, the direct plus loan. Those are really the two major federal borrowing programs for both students and parents. I'm snickering a little bit here because right now it makes up 90% of the total loan market for college is federal government loans, right? So it owns the entire market. Essentially, the new administration has proposed for the parent loan to go away entirely starting next year, right? A year from now, a year from July 1st. So July 1st, 2026. And some major changes to the federal student loan program as well, specifically the subsidized loan, which means that everybody's going to pay interest while they're in college. Then we have the private student loan sector. There's state loan programs that get talked about less, but something that we just want to flag. And a small percentage of colleges have their own loans. They're usually very competitive, but there's usually not, again, there's a very small percentage of colleges that even offer these, and they're usually small amounts, right? $2,000 to $5,000. And then lastly, Peggy's going to walk us through some of the non-traditional kind of alternative loan options that can potentially be leveraged for college. So the federal direct student loan that I was this is one of the few universal recommendations we can give. If your family needs to borrow, start here. Okay, you're not going to find a better repayment terms, more flexible repayment terms. This is the only loan that students can take that do not require a cosigner. Okay, so they don't need established credit. They don't need a cosigner. They're not going to get a bill until 6 months after college. There's no prepayment penalties. We don't know next year's rates, but they'll very likely, right, based on the Treasury, come down a little bit from where they were last year. But and they'll be relatively competitive, specifically in this space. So these are the total amounts that you can borrow each year, 5,500, freshman year, 6,500, 75, 75. The subsidized portion of that loan. So on the left here, 35, 45, 55, 55. Right now, if you've been offered a subsidized loan, it means you're not paying interest on that amount while the kids are in college. Again, this administration is proposing getting rid of that, so nobody would be eligible for that subsidized portion. We even have our clients that don't need to borrow take advantage of this. Why? Because they can pay it off for their kids instantaneously. And that way, when they graduate as 22-year-olds, they'll have established credit. They'll have like a 780 credit score if you jump through the hoops of taking advantage of this every year. So again, it's a universal recommendation. Everybody should take advantage of it, whether or not your family actually needs this in order to make it happen. But this is where we start. This is where we start the borrowing process. Go ahead, Peggy. Okay, and I talked through some of these, so this is a little bit redundant, right? But we can establish credit history, only loan where we don't need a cosigner. The origination fee is negligible, essentially. What I didn't mention is an important one. This bullet point appeals, and I had I don't want to say it got contentious. I made a very firm recommendation that a family that was eligible for need-based aid take advantage of this. Okay, and and they're very I don't know, not a lot of tolerance for debt, which is an amazing goal. But it's very likely if you need to appeal or you want to appeal, or in some cases, keep all the need-based financial aid that you have in subsequent years, you better take advantage of this, because if you don't, the colleges are saying, why did we give them this need-based financial aid when they didn't need the federal direct student loan? So clearly, they don't need all the financial aid that we gave them because we consider this to be part of their financial aid package. You're telling the college, we don't need all the discounts you gave us. We didn't use them all, okay? And this has a massive impact, especially if you want to try to get a better deal, or at least keep your deal, or maybe if you have a change, a negative change in subsequent years where you're saying, hey, I lost my job, we need more help. They're going to say, brother, you didn't give the help that we gave you in previous years. Sorry. Take it or leave it, right? So it's almost we're almost buying ourselves insurance by taking advantage of it. And again, remember, guys, no prepayment penalties. Take advantage of it, pay it off the next day. No big deal.
Yeah, we're hearing more and more schools, and our experts are sharing like these schools are looking. They're looking to see if you took those loans because, and it makes sense. Like you're asking for more money. How hard up can they be if they didn't even take the best loan out there that has all these great perks? So it's a
100.
huge point to make.
The narrative makes sense, right? But guess what? It plays out that way in practice. So, and there's a couple steps that students got to complete online. They're, in the slide here in order for that money to actually change hands. Pretty stinking low barrier to entry. And as we, in the coming weeks, we'll send out Peggy does some great kind of line by line guidance. You guys can look out for that. Students can kind of just follow her step by step. So, the Parent Plus loan, this is the program for parents that need to borrow money to send their kids to college, again, if they want to go the federal route. Now, historically, there's been a lot of years where this would be my first recommendation to a high percentage of families. That has waned over the years. And again, it might go away altogether. That's what's being proposed. I have a feeling it might go through too, as a matter of fact. Again, one man's opinion here, but it is being proposed that this go away altogether starting next year. Okay. Couple things to talk about. Number one, only the parent's name is on this loan. So if you want your kids to have formal skin in the game and be, actually, again, formally attached to this loan, you probably got to dismiss this as an option right away because it is only in your name, right? So let's be clear on that, is only in your name. Last year, and there's a reasonable expectation this will go down a little bit, 9% fixed interest rate. Not the most attractive number. Pretty stinking expensive loan, especially when we add on the tack on the origination fee, which is like by far the highest of any educational loan at 4+%. So effectively, this is a 10% loan last year. Again, it might go down a little bit, but it's going to be directionally in this ballpark this year. Historically, again, there's been forgiveness programs and again, a lot of flexibility and a lot of reasons why people in certain specifically occupations should seek this out, right? If you're a police officer, if you're a fireman, if you work at a nonprofit, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, there are some great forgiveness programs. Some of these have already been eliminated, but the writing is on the wall and the dominoes are falling that's they might all be eliminated. So again, it's unlikely that this is going to be a great feature or reason to seek out this loan moving forward as any aspirations that any of it might get forgiven. Now, so that's kind of the overview of it. I think we got another slide or two here, Peggy, talking through it. Um,
Yeah, and I would just point out too, like Matt said, this could be eliminated. So when you're doing that 4 year, if you're counting on this, it's not a percentage play.
exactly. And see if we have one more slide because I hit on each of those, Peggy. And if not,
No,
I'll.
we're into state now.
Okay, so before I move on for the plus loan, one thing that for a meaningful percentage of families, this loan's their only option. Because one, some say it's a positive, some say it's a negative. It probably depends what side of the fence you're on. It's by far the easiest loan to qualify for. You don't need great credit. You don't have to have, as a matter of fact, you can have zero income and you're still that won't impact your ability to qualify for that, which is a problem. But for a lot of families, the rates they might get in the private sector via the state loan, number one, they might just be denied if they have lower credit, and this is kind of their last option. So some folks have no option aside from the plus loan, but again, I guess to their credit, this would be on the positive side of the fence that if you do need that last resort, and this is the only kind of folks that are willing to cut you a check in order to make college happen, that may be where you turn to there. Okay, so state loans here, right? Not every state has a lending program. We got, and again, it can change from year to year, but call it roughly 20 states in the country have a loan program, and you can. We just like to flag it because most people just aren't aware because they don't market very well, right? They're not going to hammer your inbox like some of the private lenders. But us here in Massachusetts, for example, if actually let me use a different example. Let me use Vermont. Okay, so if and the name of their organization is VSAC, but if you're a Vermont resident, you can borrow through VSAC, or maybe you're not a Vermont resident, but your kid's going to UVM up in Burlington there. That's another reason where I can use that state's program. So we want you to look in your state, and we want you to look in whatever state your kid is going to school if it's out of state. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Iowa, they're kind of unique because anybody can borrow through these states, right? So you could be like Peggy, right? You can be a Washington resident, and your kid could go to Indiana, like Peggy's son Brennan went to, and you could borrow through Iowa, right? Or Rhode Island or Massachusetts. So we just kind of want to bring awareness to this because there tends to be some pretty good features and some fairly competitive options. Again, from all states in general, but if you're not a state and your kid's not going to a state in which there is a state loan options, at least check out these three, right, as part of your due diligence here. Okay, now the private sector here, right? So again, I think these guys do the best job in terms of their marketing, right? I'd be willing to bet they are in your inbox already. If they're not, you can get ready to see them. But I will tell you, over the years, they become a more attractive option, right? Especially when we compare it to the plus loan. Now, again, let's remember the first thing I said if I have 10 different families, I'm probably gonna have 10 different loan recommendations, but they have some nice features here. One of the big ones is just I don't want to say none of them, but it's very rare that there's any origination fees. Okay, so that piece of it is nice. For parents that want their kids to have formal skin in the game, they're going to be attached to these loans. There's exceptions there, but generally speaking, the student borrows this money. The parent is there as a cosigner, as a safety net. Okay. And again, we have a many different lenders to choose from. There is a marketplace here, so we like to at least hope that the competition among the lenders we get the benefit from, as consumers, and we see that. One thing that I will tell you, and this is something that we've learned because it's the velocity has been faster in the last few years specifically. Lenders will change their rates and repayment terms all the time. So we want to keep an eye on this, and is very common for us to say, hey, here's your best option this week, and 2 weeks later, if you haven't got your loan yet, okay, here's a new player. So Peggy and I will be talking about this literally through August. We'll do our last presentation around loans and repayment, probably the week before Labor Day here. But it is one of these things that is ever changing. So just continue to pay attention. It's too early in the season for us to have any kind of firm recommendations or leaders in the clubhouse or anything like that. So the idea today is just kind of teach a high level pros and cons about each of these sectors, so to speak. And Peggy, I think we have one more slide on there. Um, Okay, just go back because just a couple other talking points then. So I guess we don't have another one. Number one, usually these private lenders will start you and present a variable interest rate. So we just want to flag that to know that it might look beautiful day one, but be clear, is this thing going to change or is that staying there? Most of them also have a fixed interest rate that you can choose from. But it's usually not as obvious what that is. You have to search for it a little, and it's usually a little bit more expensive than your kind of introductory rate, and your rate will be determined based on the strength of the cosigner's application. So we see a huge variation here where some families might get a 3.75 interest rate, which is going to be the belle of the ball this year, and there's going to be very few of these. Others, yeah, you got approved for the loan, but it's 18.5%. Okay. And it's all how big of a risk these lenders see you, right? If I love my odds of getting my money back, all right, I'm not going to charge you too much for it. If I think you're a big risk to default, you're going to pay me a massive premium if I'm going to approve you at all. So that's kind of how that piece works. And I don't think we said anything about the timing, Peggy. It might feel like, did you talk about the timing? You did. You did at the beginning. Sorry.
Yeah, I did a bit. Yeah.
All right, Peggy, go ahead, buddy.
All right. Well, get in there because there's some, you guys are really killing it. You got some great, great questions. Some of them are just really difficult, and we'll talk about at the end how we can help you because some of them we can't just rattle off a two-sentence answer, but keep them coming. Great, great questions. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to spend a few minutes on these, checking my time here. Alternative ways to cover some of the costs here that aren't technically loans. These could be loans here. So your home, if you're sitting on a lot of equity, your market value minus whatever your mortgage is, that's your equity. There's different ways to tap that, right? Interest rates are relatively high right now. I was having families do cash out refis en masse years ago when they had higher mortgage rates and they could refinance to a lower rate, pull some money out, pay for college. Their P&I payment stayed the same or went down. It was brilliant, right? That's not the case right now. The other two options are there though. Some of you might already have a home equity line of credit that you've applied for and been approved for 200,000 or whatever it is. That could be an option depending. There's usually variable interest rates. So we don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. There's a lot going on in the economy, and the Fed's really, it's a difficult time for the Fed to manage their mission. So we can't really say what's going to happen there. But for some families, a HELOC might make sense to draw on that or at least apply for it and have it as an option. And then there's home equity loans. That is usually not as great because then you get a loan, you're immediately paying interest on that loan. That money is sitting somewhere in a non-retirement account, and then you're going to have to put it on the financial aid forms. So that's not always the best call for families. But again, just like Matt and I have been saying throughout the presentation today, really depends on your family. These are all options. The cash out refi is probably not, unless you have some insanely high interest rate on your mortgage, which you're going to want to fix anyways, higher than the going rates, which I'm guessing none of you do. Okay, 401k loan. So some 401ks allow this. It just completely depends on the plan document. I'm not in love with this one. Being a financial planner, you truly are robbing your retirement. This is something you set aside. It's not a typical vehicle to put a lot of money in to pull out for college. You have to be allowed to, you have to be vested a decent amount in your plan. And usually it has to be repaid within 5 years. If for some reason you're leaving employment there or you get let go, you have to repay it. If you don't have those funds, it can blow up really quickly. So I've had a few parents through the years that are just insisting that they want to do this, and I make sure they're doing it with their eyes wide open. So usually if you're going to this extreme, it's really an indicator that this school is probably not affordable, in my opinion. Life insurance. So we can help you with this. We have a few people on our team that have done this successfully, for families. You need to be careful with this one. If you have a certain kind of life insurance policy that has a cash value, you can leverage that. I will say high level. You want to be careful taking a distribution, because you always have to understand when you're doing this, how is that impacting my tax return? How is that going to be looked at by the colleges down the road? If you're getting need-based aid, you have to be forward thinking, because when you get to that tax year, then all of a sudden you lose money that you were getting from the college potentially. So you need to talk to professionals who can tell you the best way to leverage that if you have it. And if you're sitting on a whole chunk of money that you want to put somewhere so that it doesn't affect you negatively potentially with financial aid, you can talk to us about that. And we will not knee jerk tell you to buy life insurance, but if it makes sense for your family, we're really going to look at it, what's in your best interest, what's in the best interest of your child, and leveraging the maximum amount of money that you can get from a college. But that is an option out there. So those are the alternative, if you will, not fringe, but different ways to cover the cost of college outside of loans. You want
Uh,
to take this one, Matt?
I do, yeah. So I teased at the beginning, right? You know, our recommendations to folks are largely going to be based on their family's borrowing criteria, right? And what the hell is that? Well, these are the questions you need to start asking yourselves, having conversations with your partner, with the student, right? And ultimately, how we answer these are going to help our logic tree and point us towards, again, which recommendations most make the most sense. So obviously, how much does the rate of loan matter? It matters a lot, but I'm more asking, is it the only thing that matters? Or usually our job is pretty easy when someone's like, I don't care what the repayment terms are, who's on the loan, me, student, both, whomever. I just want the lowest rate. Great, we can help you with that. Okay. Um, but there's other things to consider. So who do we want on the loan? How long do we want them on there? Plenty of people are like, look at this is my kid's responsibility, and they're on the hook for this. Okay. Okay, so then we want to seek out loans where, yes, we know after the federal direct student loan, we as parents or somebody's going to have to co-sign on this, but there's a decent amount of programs where there's an early co-signer release program. And that's one of the big features. So maybe after we've made 12 payments, that's usually as aggressive as co-signer releases you can have. You can get off there potentially as the co-signer, and now it's their loan, right? And this happens, a year after they graduate, again after you've made 12 consecutive payments. Now, you're probably going to pay a little bit of a higher interest rate for that feature. And that's usually how it works. There's kind of some give and take here. How much do I value consumer protection and flexibility? So, in other words, if somebody's like, I have this very, unpredictable income, I'm self-employed or I'm in sales and it's just feast or famine for me. So you would really value that flexibility. So again, historically, that might point us saying, hey, we might be okay paying a higher interest to the federal government, but we might like that flexibility of a 25-year repayment plan, something like this. Now, again, with all these changes happening with the federal government, we're, I guess, less confident saying here's exactly how it works because there's some speculation there. But I think it's a fair assumption still, and famous last words here, that that's probably going to be some of our most flexible options, albeit more expensive. And that's very much tied to the fourth bullet point here, because when we say flexibility and repayment options, we almost look at those as like insurance, right? Oftentimes we can pause our payments with the federal government, go into forbearance, which is another word for pause, ultimately, in a way that we can't necessarily with all lenders, right? Other lenders might just say, hey, we're going to give you a more flexible rate, but you got to pay us come hell or high water, right? Um, and then lastly, do I want to access home equity? I don't know. Call it 4 or 5 years ago. This would probably be we try to talk people into home equity because we say, hey, the rates are amazing. That's real money in your walls here. Borrow, from yourself at 2.75%, right? As opposed to going to the federal government at 8%. Kind of a no-brainer. Home equity, rates are not like that anymore. And you might be on a 2.75%, and do you really want to refi, at 7% right now? So probably not. So again, we have it on there because it historically has been a meaningful option that we wanted parents to at least consider. And that's more of a philosophical question at that point. Because some folks, even when the rates are great, are just like, I don't care if it's the cheapest money. I'm not tapping anything in my home equity to pay for college. Fair enough. But we wanted to have and bring that conversation to the table, which is what this is, right? We're trying to help you figure out pros and cons of each options and ultimately which one makes the most sense for us. And I think this is the last slide, Peggy, before I'm going to share my screen. So this is, and is it this one? Go to the next one, Peggy, that shows kind of the or
Yeah.
pop the graph.
Yeah, this one just has a bill. There you go.
So now this is an actual loan here, right? And I think because what we're trying to do and what's been a challenge for me and I think us as a team historically is to get families to understand the importance of making this choice of what loan or combination of loans are we going to utilize to make this happen, because it's almost too easy to get this money. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit of a pain in the ass by, doing our homework and doing a couple other applications. But this is a family that went to a state school. So they need to borrow $150,000 over the course of 4 years, right? UMass now, right? My state flagship university, it's 40 grand a year in state resident. So it's going to be 170,000 when we bake in inflation if we're not getting financial aid. But this family state school need to borrow $150,000, took out the plus loan, and it's a good case study, okay, because that ended up costing them. There was a 2% difference that they would have been eligible for, okay, in the private sector. And it cost them, right? It cost them $60,000. Okay, college was $60,000 more expensive because of a 2% difference in kind of the loan option we make. So I just I can't emphasize enough how important this decision is. And again, is it just interest that we're looking at? Is it just interest that's important? Of course not, right? We emphasize these other less tangible factors, but I do want you to take this decision really, really seriously, because again, in my experience here, too many families are just like, we just got to come up with the money and path of least resistance and boom, done, buried my head in the sand, and please don't do that. And Peggy, let me share my screen here if I have it teed up, which I think I do. All right, I'm going to lean on you pretty hard here, just like I have in the chat. Don't be, what is it? Let me see if I can say it right this time, Peggy. And I don't say this every time, but penny wise and pound foolish. Is that it?
Yeah, you did it.
The last thing that you want to do when you're getting to think of like, oh God, how am I going to come up with this money, is like spending more money. Make the investment, guys. If you book, just like we said, if you book an hour with us today, we take off, what is it, 20%. So you'll save yourself $60. Let us help you make this very important decision and make sure at a minimum, guys, at a minimum, you can say, I made the investment dollar wise and time wise, because we can do this homework for you and with you in real time. And I know I'm choosing the best loan for my family, right? I know I'm having access to the lowest rate that I could possibly find, right? Make that dollar, like, don't overthink that one, guys. Book that today. It's only going to be, available today, or at least the discount's only going to be available today for the folks that showed up live. In addition, though, you want us to look at your financial aid award from whatever school that you are at. You want us to make an educated opinion to say, should we go back and get more? And if we should, how should we do it? Should it be the student? Should it be the parent? Are we going to missions? Are we going to financial aid? How much are we asking for? Right? Or maybe there's a school that we didn't attend that we want to take a look at too, right? And oftentimes we'll look at your FAFSA CSS profile. Did you make any mistakes there that can allow us to adjust your SAI and get some more money from these schools? So that's kind of number one. Let's reduce the amount they have to borrow by helping us, or by allowing us to help you to get a better deal, at whatever college you're attending, and then pay for it the smart way. We'll give you these firm recommendations. Do we use the 529 all up front? Should we spread it out over 4 years? Right? How about grandparents? When should we use that? We just got an inheritance. Do we use that all up front? These are really, really important decisions. We want to make sure that you get them right. Another thing when it comes to using resources is, if we make some wrong decisions, it can negatively impact our aid package in subsequent years, right? And we've heard that, we see it all the time, right? Where I liquidated this at a point that again negatively impacted my aid eligibility. I should have sat on that until junior year, for example. So don't overthink this one. I mean, I'll just put the let me just grab this link as well, where you can book right through the chat here. Oh, actually, let me just kind of show you, because I just got a question on that, just to take you through step by step here. So, okay, how to actually do it. So on this link that is in the chat, all you got to do is say book your hour today, and then make sure you add the promotional code. So I'm going to say add the promotional code HTP. So this is for how to pay 20. I hit apply. You're going to see that $60 come off there, $59.80, and then check out. So again, nobody wants to think about spending money here, guys, but this is a drop in the bucket based on kind of what's at stake here. So kind of like, you'll thank me and Peggy, but you'll thank yourselves ultimately. And again, whoever you sit down with, you're gonna be, it's gonna be an absolute stud. And if you feel like it was a waste of time or money, right into support. They'll get in touch with me, and I'll either eat crow and give you your money back, or say, no, guys, you're wrong. But
So Matt, after they do that, right? They put in the code, they book, then they've got to go into their MyCap account.
no, it won't have to be in there.
It'll pop up the screen right there.
Exactly. As soon as you pay, guys. So, as soon as you pay, and you make your payment here, right? Or the calendar will come up, and you pick the day and time that works best for you and your family.
Okay, because somebody was asking that. Yeah, so you
And you
just
can
gotta.
always move it too. Like if your spouse is not here today, or your ex-spouse, or if you want your student to sit in on this conversation, book a time, take a best guess. If you have to move it, it's no sweat. We'll work with you to take care of that. But yeah,
Yeah, you can see on the screen there, it's 239. Someone said, how much is that? And even, yeah, like Matt said, when you get your confirmation, there should be a reschedule link. So if for some reason you pick a time and then you talk to your spouse later today, just go on and hit reschedule, and then you can go ahead and reschedule. So don't worry about, you're locked into that date and time. You can always reschedule it.
Yep. And great questions too. Great questions. Very educated questions. I can tell, Peggy, you can tell a lot of these guys have been following along. And if they haven't been, they're a savvy.
Yeah. And they're great questions, but a lot of them, they're just, I was putting in there, we got to talk to you. We got to talk to you. And we just really do. We're not trying to upsell. This is a part of the process. We just can't answer. How exactly should the grandparents pay? How does that affect the grandparents and their tax return? That's like a super, super long, unique answer to your situation. So we have a great team of experts that are more than happy to help, and it's going to be worth every penny, especially with the 20% off. So
Yep. That's what we're here for. Peggy, thank you. Mean it, buddy. We'll see you out there. And thanks everybody else.
all right. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.